Lake Mungo is a mockumentary about a teenage girl who dies and then seemingly haunts her family in the weeks and months that follow. This one comes from Australia and has gained a cult following over the years. Let's take a look. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter and joining me as always is Tim.
Cannonball! Woo! Splash!
Is that a reference to the movie?
I mean, just lakes in general.
Just lakes in okay. I was like, I don't remember a cannonball scene. Welcome everyone. This is a horror movie podcast. We get together and talk about a movie. It's that simple. This episode, which is part of our Octoberthon, of course, we're putting out tons of episodes for spooky season. But this episode was a Patreon vote winner. We had three options, which were kind of random, to be honest. But Lake Mungo was the victor in the vote, which is a movie, it turns out, I knew very little about going in, because I did not know it was a mockumentary. But so that was a bit of a shock to the system when it started. But, yeah, I know that this has a little bit of buzz. I know that it's a bit of a cult. I don't know if it's a favourite, but there's definitely, like, I've heard the name. It gets mentioned in the horror circles. And this came out in 2008. It's an Australian movie. So we'll get into it, but we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers. And if you are enjoying the show on YouTube, do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch. And of course, you can get bonus episodes and exclusive content over at Patreon or via YouTube membership. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. So I guess the first question, Tim, is if you'd seen this before or not.
Yeah, surprisingly, I want to say this might be like my third or maybe even fourth time watching it. Well, because I feel like I saw it when it first came out, and then like you're saying, this is one that gets like brought up. I feel like not all the time, but I hear it enough like on podcasts and stuff where people are like talking about, you know, stuff that's maybe people don't always know about, or like deep cuts. Like it's not like super deep, but you know, it's one that people are like, oh, and you know, it's like a really good one that not everyone has seen is this one. So I feel like there's been like a couple of times throughout the years where I've been like, oh yeah, like people mention that one, and it's always on like all the free services and stuff. So it's one that like I'll see streaming stuff and I'll be like, oh yeah, did I watch this? I don't remember. Maybe I should check it out again. Or like, oh yeah, they mentioned on the podcast. Maybe I should give that another whirl. I mean, does that mean that I like it? I don't know. Well, I mean,
it's not a good sign if you keep forgetting that you've watched it and keep going, have I seen this before? I'm going to watch it.
Well, like I feel like I've known before that like I put it on, but then I'm like, I don't know, did I finish it or I don't remember much. I don't know.
Again, not a great sign, all things considered, but we'll find out how we feel in a second. The basic premise of this, like I said, it's a mockumentary that starts with basically the death of a teenage girl who dies in a lake. Not Lake Mungo though. Lake Mungo comes later, but she dies in a lake. And it's basically just dealing with the grief of the family, and then the idea that her ghost might be around after her death. And I'll just leave it there. Obviously, there's some turns, there's some revelations, there's things going on. But, you know, it's talking heads, it's like creepy footage taken from phones. And keep in mind, this came out in 2008, and it's set in late 2005, early 2006. So, and I was thinking this as I was watching it, actually, that a lot of this creepy footage, it's very like blurry and digitized, and you're getting just glimpses of things. I'm like, if this was set 10 years later, then all the phone footage would be like pristine in 4K, and like I'm not saying it would be perfect as if it was a movie, but it wouldn't look like this. So you can only do this type of like, oh, the footage is kind of rough and you can only sort of vaguely see it. You can only really do that back in this you know, heyday, or even before now with you know, with old like VHS security tapes and things like that could be fuzzy and wavy and blurry and all those other things. But I was thinking about it as I was watching it. But anywho, I mean, that's the basic gist of it. I don't think there's much more to say, really. So, Tim, what did you think of Lake Mungo? Yes. You can get it out. Yeah. I believe in you.
Splish splash. I
not pee, Tim, your opinion.
I feel kind of bad because I feel like there are definitely people like I said, they hold this in high regard and is like maybe like again, not widespread, but definitely like maybe a little bit of has a cult status among some people and stuff. And I don't know, it just doesn't really work for me. I get what they're trying to do, and there's stuff that I can appreciate, but I don't know, I just find it kind of like a slog to get through. And I mean, I don't think it probably helps that like I've seen this multiple times, because at least the first time you're watching it, yeah, if you don't know anything about it, you're probably a bit more like captivated by like what's happening and how things are going to turn out, and when maybe some mysteries or things kind of get filled in. And it's not like again, when I'm watching it, I didn't remember everything that like happened perfectly, but I kind of knew like some of the broad strokes of things that were going to happen. And yeah, it's just one of those things where like it's I just don't find it like the talking heads stuff to be very compelling. Like obviously there's not like a lot of action. There's like bits and pieces of like footage and stuff here, but like you said, it's all very grainy, and it's the kind of thing that's like oh yeah, like you can kind of see something a little bit if you zoom in. And I don't know, I've seen like so many like ghost shows and stuff like this that it's just like not very interesting to me. And again, I'm watching this in 2024 when we've seen more stuff like this. Like it probably seemed a lot more fresh in, was it like 2008 or something, about the time it came out. So I mean, credit for it kind of doing this thing that I feel like there wasn't as much kind of stuff like that back then. But yeah, watching it now, I don't know. I hate to say it, but it's just a tad slow and boring for me.
Oh dear. Internet's going to be on your tail.
I mean, they're always coming for my ass. It's coming for it's with the territory at this point. This was an interesting watch, just because I didn't even know it was a mockumentary, and then once it got going, I'm like, okay, this is the type of movie it is. Let's settle in and like look for like vague implications in some of the interviews and how they're going to weave something together that like suggests certain things. It does have some red herring things. It does have some. I think my biggest critique, I think, would be that I don't know if it felt like everything came together by the end. There was multiple like avenues the story goes down that felt kind of like separate from what the main thing was, and I don't know if it ever felt like it was really like tied back into the movie, so that by the end I feel like everything formed a whole. It kind of felt like there's a whole revelation about a tape at one point. I mean, it's not saying much. I mean, there's a lot of footage in this, but there's a videotape specifically about halfway through that kind of sends us down like a rabbit hole of a new direction, and I don't really feel like it ever really came back round to being integrated into like the other things that were going on. It felt just kind of like a separate branch rather than something that actually fed into where it goes at the end or what it was saying at the end. I will say this though, like I do think that after it was over and I was sitting thinking about it for a couple of minutes, there is a little bit of kind of subtext and depth that maybe wasn't as apparent as I was watching it. Because as I was watching it, I was finding it constantly like, it would sort of set something up that's kind of creepy, but then it would kind of explain it away and say, nah, but it's not, it's just fine. Just, like it kept, I don't know, deflating itself, I guess, as I was watching it. But after I was done and I was sort of thinking about some of the hints that were sort of spread throughout, and I was thinking about like the ending specifically, and what like the mood of the ending is very interesting, because regardless of how I felt sort of at any point throughout the movie, the ending did have this kind of sad tone to it, and like sort of exploring why it felt that way kind of, I think, opened up a few things for me. So I think I respect it a little bit more than you do. But I will also say that I don't necessarily think I was like thoroughly engrossed the entire time. There was definitely stretches where I'm like, this is just a bunch of talking heads, and sometimes it is just doing very simple, obvious things of like, oh, we're looking at some footage and there's a figure standing in the background. If
If you are creeped out with that idea, you're going to love this movie. If you aren't that impressed with a creepy figure standing in the background of some video footage, then you're going to be frustrated by this, because ultimately that's the main trick that it has up its sleeve for, not all of it, right? But for a good portion of the movie, that's what you're kind of like relying on for your creepy horror movie feelings more than anything else.
Yeah, well, yeah, and to be fair, like I wouldn't say that like I don't respect it. Like I guess it is admirable that it is, you know, it's going for something, and I'd say that they, you know, for the most part, kind of achieve for like what the film is trying to be. It's just that you know type of film is maybe you know not the thing that I necessarily want to watch, or you know at least this point in my life.
This point of your life, you had too many mockumentaries. Well, I guess a mockumentary, particularly when you get the footage of stuff that's from phones or whatever, it starts to feel more like found footage. And found footage and mockumentary are, you know, they're kind of cousins of each other in terms of like, you know, styles and subgenres.
Right, yeah. So I'd say they're pretty closely related.
Yeah, maybe that's why to some extent you kind of feel like, oh, you know, we've had so many found footage movies over the last... I mean, even by the time this came out, there was a few of them, but this came out around the same time. I mean, Paranormal Activity 1 is technically 2007 because of festivals, but it was actually like 2009 before it was like publicly out to everyone. Yeah. So just think of how many found footage movies there's been since Paranormal Activity 1, and like how much that subgenre just exploded over the next decade.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder if that fatigue is almost hurting some of this in hindsight. Obviously, it's not all that. There is all the talking head stuff as well. But there's definitely kind of... And this is actually a funny thing to critique in a weird way, because real documentaries do this. Real documentaries absolutely do what I'm about to say, but it bothers me more in this movie than it does in a documentary. Right, so in a real documentary, one of the things that is key to like making it engaging and telling your story, right? Because that's what you do as a documentary filmmaker. Is okay, you collect your footage, you have an idea of what you're doing, but maybe once you actually get all your interviews and footage, it's like, oh, there's kind of a narrative that can form around this that, you know, becomes a structure, that becomes something that an audience can go through from A to B to C, so on and so on. And they'll do that. And part of what doing that means is like, oh, we won't mention this part of it until late on. We'll have that kind of almost be a surprise after. We'll get the audience used to this one idea, and then we'll give them this extra element later on. And this does that. And there's not anything inherently wrong with that. But for some reason, because it's not a real documentary, and this is so weird to say, and I get this is weird to say, it actually felt more manipulative to me than when a real documentary does it, even though a real documentary is playing with real information.
That's fair, yeah.
This is all fictional, but somehow this bothered me more for some reason, because it felt like more of a cheap trick when an actual movie doesn't have to do that. The reason why a documentary does it is because you have to take a bunch of real information and present it in a way that's compelling. So it's part of the art form of doing it. And technically it's true of regular movies as well to an extent. Like, obviously that's why you have something like a twist, right? It's like, oh, it's something we didn't know before that now adds more depth to it. But a normal movie can be compelling in all the normal ways first. It can, you know, have a sequential story where you get into a character, where it's doing a narrative, and you get that. With this, I did have a sort of sneaking feeling at times where I'm like, okay, we're focusing on this, we're focusing on that. But then, like, you know, there's one revelation in particular that kind of bugged me, that like they kind of kept secret, and I know why they kept secret, and I can even explain why they did it, so that the audience was sort of like going through the story like the family did, where the family didn't know about this until later. But it still kind of annoyed me in the moment, because I'm like, oh, that's just okay, all right. we're adding this in now. Fine, we'll go with it. I don't know. It's a weird complaint, because I admit that this is a real documentary thing that happens, and I'm completely fine with it in actual documentaries. But for whatever reason, it bothered me more here, because I guess because you've chosen this format for your fictional movie, you've put these obstacles in your own way, which I appreciate. Like, I appreciate having a gimmick and sticking to it and saying, these are our rules, we're not going to break those rules. But at the same time, it's a fictional movie. You have the freedom to do anything you can with this format. You can do anything you want with it. So it felt like it was, I don't know. Again, it's a weird disconnect, because I think many people would argue, and I understand why they would argue, that it actually feels more real because of that. But for me, it almost took me out of it in a strange way.
No, I get that. I mean, there's one thing to like, have something feel real, but then also like doing what's best for the story. And yeah, maybe if it would have made it a little tighter or something. It's funny, just going back a little bit to what you were saying before about how like we've seen so many like found footage movies and stuff like since then, but I mean I do feel like this type of like mockumentary is like with talking heads and stuff, like I feel like we don't see these as that often. Like so many like of the found footage stuff we see is usually just trying to ape like Blair Witch or Paranormal Activity or something like that. But what I do think is kind of interesting is maybe we don't see like a lot of like fake mockumentary horror movies like this, but I feel like we see so many like actual quote unquote real shows like this. Like this kind of format is like half of Netflix right now. Like,
oh sure, yeah. Yeah, maybe just fatigue from the real thing sort of lends itself over to just not being that excited about how this is presented. Because I mean, there's a few movies like these. I want to say the Poughkeepsie Tapes was kind of like this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Geez, I feel like it's been forever.
Yeah, we've not done that in the show, but I watched it like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. I want to say it had kind of that vibe to it. Obviously, you have Last Broadcast, which I guess is kind of that was a little bit different. It was just kind of a one-man documentary kind of thing, but it's closer enough. Yeah. So I mean, I want to make this clear. I don't think this is a bad movie. I think it's doing some interesting things, and I do think there's some interesting exploration. The main theme that I would say that we've not mentioned yet, that I do think is probably the most interesting theme in some ways, is the idea that footage or evidence is unreliable. And it's almost meta in a sense where like, okay, this is a fake documentary, but how much of the footage, if we're considering it as real, can we actually trust? Like how much of it is being manipulated? I do think that's like a theme in there that works quite well. And then I also think there's some stuff to talk about, like some theories about what's really went on. Like, is there a ghost? Isn't there a ghost? Why there's a ghost if there is one? Like, I think that stuff, there is some interesting sort of analysis or some speculation to glean from what you're presented with in the movie by the end. But I do think the scene to scene is a bit dry at times.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm super hard on this movie or anything. Like, I think there is still merit to it. It is doing interesting things. It's just, I just don't feel like completely into it when I watch it. But, still worth checking out. Like, if people haven't seen it, like, it's doing something different, and maybe it'll grab you. But
you sound you're such a just like sad sounding when you say it.
I'm also very tired. It's been a long weekend. So
no, just it is like sometimes we come on here and we say, oh, it's really tough to talk about a movie that's middling, and I don't think this movie's middling, but I think it's another difficult one to talk about, where it's a movie that has a fair bit of fandom, a fair bit of acclaim, that like we can kind of recognize why it has that acclaim, but it just doesn't quite click for us.
Sure.
It feels like it clicks a wee bit less for you than it does for me, even based on your tone. But I think it's an interesting movie. It's an interesting movie. Sure. I don't think it overstays its welcome at the very least. I kind of like, I checked the time at one point and was like, oh, I'm only 15 minutes from the end. I guess it's went in relatively quickly, so I can't fault it on that front. At the very least, performances, they're fairly natural, I would say. I don't really have any complaints, I don't think.
I could have used some stars.
Get
some big boys in this.
I'm sorry, you said it's an Australian movie and there's no Hugh Jackman, and you don't know what to do with yourself with that.
Well, I'm a Mel Gibson, man. I would have.
Okay. Yeah.
He's Australian, right?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mad Mungo. That was the original title before they couldn't get Mel. He was too busy. He was in the process at this point of getting arrested and calling people sugar tits. I don't actually know if that was around this time, but it was. It feels close enough.
It probably sounds about right.
Yeah. yeah, it's an interesting movie. Like, I don't want to sound like too negative, because I feel like it does have a goal. It does feel like it has a creative style and flair that it's going for. It does feel like someone is trying to make a movie they care about, that they're passionate about. This is not some soulless, just another supernatural movie from Blumhouse or whatever that all feel the same.
I mean, I guess there's like a version you could do that is trying to be like Paranormal Activity, where it's like the son's going around filming everything, and that would probably be, a lot less interesting and just more generic.
Yeah, I mean, it's got its ID and it's doing its own thing, so I think I respect it a little bit more than I enjoyed watching it. But
that sounds fair. Yeah,
I can't. Yeah, like, I do have some things to fault, I guess. Like, I do think that sometimes the flow of the story feels a little bit weird to me. But, I mean, we'll get into all that in spoilers in a minute when we dive in.
It's also, like, I mean, this just might depend on your taste or whatever, but it's, like, not a happy or fun movie at all. Like, if you want to put something like, hey, it's Halloween season, I want to watch something like a bit more fun, like, maybe a bit more goofy, or that I'm going to have some laughs, like, this ain't that movie. Like, it's not like, some of the movies we get now where it's like everything's a metaphor for trauma. Like, I wouldn't go that far, but it is, mostly about trauma.
Oh yeah, it's a downer. So it's a downer movie for sure. I mean, ultimately, it's about a family grieving a dead child, and that's
woohoo! Yeah, party time. Throw it on at your Halloween bash, and
so. And I think
this is the part where the mom cries. Turn it up.
I think in terms of exploring that, it is actually not bad. Like, I think it's that's maybe where its strength really lies. Is kind of like looking at how much this family, the parents especially, knew their daughter. And did they not know her that well? And if they didn't know her that well, what does that say about them? Is there guilt here along with the idea of just the general grief of the tragedy that happened,
Yeah. Oh man, what's gonna happen when I disappear and you just find this like random tape that just shows like me and, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but that'll be something.
I didn't hear a word of that. I was off there with my headphones off, so I don't know what joke Tim was making, but I'll just assume it was okay.
I was just saying, eventually when I disappear and you find a tape with me and some other people on it, and how that will affect you.
I mean, I'm horrified at the thought of finding it. I'll say that much. So, all right. I guess, the one thing I suppose I'll say before we go to spoilers then is I looked up the director here, writer and director Joel Anderson. Notably, he actually did like consulting work and produced Late Night with the Devil. Didn't direct or anything like that, but
oh, interesting.
Yeah, he was loosely connected to that at the very least. But I didn't really recognize anything else on his sheet, but hey, worth mentioning all the same. So, all right, I think we'll say spoilers then for Lake Mungo, so we can dive in and talk about it and
dive in, like what you do in a lake.
I didn't even mean that, but I'll take the pun. It's fine. I'm okay with it. Going through this in order sounds like a nightmare, because trying to remember what they revealed and when they revealed it seems like a...
Oh. Well, let's start with the scene where the family members are talking.
You're going to have to be a bit more specific than that, Tim. There's a lot of that in this movie.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, it starts with just this idea of them talking about, the teenage girl, Alice, has went missing, the police came out, blah, 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 and you hear a little bit of, there's like a policewoman who talks a little bit on camera as well, and it's very much your true crime documentary. They're talking about finding the body and what the parents were thinking, being scared. A big key point early on here is that the dad's the one that goes and identifies the body and talks about, how it looks, and the mum didn't want to see the body, which I think is one of the big main themes of this movie is this idea of letting go and like the various elements of that. I mean, one of the first things that it establishes about their personal lives is that they kind of make it clear that the mum and Alice didn't have like a great connection, kind of in the same way that like the mum and her mother, like her, Alice's grandmother, didn't have a great connection either. So like that was one of the first things they told us about these people in their personal lives, and I thought, okay, that seems like something we're going to maybe explore. Maybe there's something going on there. And I think by the end, though, because I didn't really bring it up too much, I was kind of just getting the feeling that maybe it's more of a sort of like a genetic mental illness or something like that they're kind of alluding to, or whatever. I don't know, but
well, it's like I mean, wasn't that the tagline for The Room? Like, wasn't it like, can you ever really know a person or something like that?
I mean, I don't remember that, but that's funny. I mean, I actually really like movies that are about people who have died, and then the people who know them like discover new things about them that they didn't know. Admittedly, it tends to be sweeter than this. It tends to be, oh, we found out that this person we knew also had this interest that they never shared with anyone. That's kind of sweet, or kind of, a window into like their inner selves that they never quite had. This is not quite that though. This is more like, what's sad? What, our daughter seemed to be very sad and scared of dying. Like, why did she feel that way? Admittedly, that comes a little bit later. That's more the back third of the movie, where they sort of realize that she kind of was scared of dying and somehow knew that she was going to die, and that's a whole thing to get into a little bit later.
Yeah, and like kind of going back to what you're saying too, like definitely like there's a lot about letting go in this movie, because it seems like the ghost stuff never seems like, I guess maybe when you're looking at the pictures and stuff, it's supposed to be like a little creepy, but it never seems like it's it's not about a ghost that's standing at the foot of your bed trying to like suck your soul through your toes or something. Like, it seems more about like, oh, like her spirit is still here, like, there's like a part of her that's remaining, and the family is kind of keeping, I guess like it's rekindling their, I mean, I guess like a point of it too is thinking like, oh, is she still like alive or something? Like, not even, is this a ghost? Is it possible that they got the wrong body or something? But
yeah, it is presented with an ominous tone though. Like, it maybe could be something malevolent that just looks like her or whatever, but it definitely has like a vibe. I think the first like chunk of the movie where it sort of gets into this stuff, where it's like, okay, the brother has this footage of whatever, these photographs that he was taking of the back garden, and he took one every day as part of a project, and then one day there's one there of like, it looks like his sister standing there, like they're just in the garden next to the fence, and then there's also like, I think, footage or a photograph of like where she died, and there's like a sort of image of someone looking like her off in the distance in the trees. And it sort of presents these things, and it goes so far that they actually end up exhuming the body to prove that it's definitely her that's in the coffin, which it is. They confirm it with DNA, so it's all on the up and up. But we spend,
when they did it, they yelled "Exuma."
Very good, Tim. Very good. But we get more footage where the brothers be like sort of recording like the house at night, and we get this footage where someone, possibly her, walks past like the hallway, and it's like this big moment, and like, the parents are like talking about it and how much it meant to them, how much it freaked them out, yada yada yada. Now, I want to point out here, this shot that he catches on the camera at night in the hallway, I want to point out here that I actually noticed something else in this shot that is revealed much later in the movie. Like, they make a deal out of it later, saying, hey, I was looking at that footage again, and I saw someone else there. When I first saw that shot, when they first showed it early in the movie, that was the first thing my eye caught, was this other person crouched in the corner of the frame. I'm like, there's a face there. I see this guy. There's a guy there. Who's that? And it was actually really annoying that they don't mention. And I appreciate that it was always there. They didn't try and like, bullshit us by like not having it there the first time and then putting them in the second time when the mum catches it and actually shows us it. But it, like, my eye just went straight to him. I'm like, there's a person there. Why are we not talking about him?
Yeah, well, normally you're not supposed to be able to see that, but you have this fancy new, OLED TV where you can see everything.
You just call it an OLED tab, you don't have to spell it out.
I never know if it's pronounced old or OLED or OLED.
I feel like I've been OLED every time I watch it.
Oh my. That sounds like a good TV.
No, yeah, no, I caught it. I mean, we'll come back to that later because that's a separate plot thread. But like, yeah, I didn't notice that. But the big thing with this stuff early on, though, is that because there's this other footage, this other couple was at the place where she drowned. Not when she drowned, but like a little bit later when they caught this other photograph. And this couple were recording footage just because they were having a day out or whatever. And because they realized, because this had been in the papers and it was like a sort of local, you know, kind of semi-famous on a local level what had happened to this girl and that the parents were maybe thinking there was a ghost or whatever. This couple started looking through their footage and they actually catch something, but they don't catch a ghost of Alice. They catch what looks like her brother, who I've not really spoken about yet, but Matthew is here throughout the movie. And we see him there. And he's the one that's been taking all these photos and videos of the house and like seeing these creepy images. And at this point, when the parents see this footage and they ask him about it, he confesses that he faked all the other stuff. That he doctored it all, he put her in, composited her into them. He used footage from like an old like family movie of her to make it look like she was moving in a reflection in the mirror. Which I'll be honest, until he was explaining how he doctored it, I didn't actually even see that part. Like, see the first time they zoomed in on this little mirror in the distance, I couldn't tell what I was seeing. It wasn't until he actually showed the footage that he took it from and then showed the doctored version, I went, oh, I can kind of see her now, like, you know, brushing her hair aside or whatever it is. But it's like, okay, this is interesting. This was probably the first time the movie got me interested, really, was like the revelation that everything so far had been faked. And this is where I was saying earlier, this theme of like, you can't really trust anything that we're seeing, which I think extends to the idea of Alice herself, which is that we never get to meet Alice. Alice is not a character in this movie. Alice is a character that other characters tell us about, that they interpret how she was. We see footage of her from the past, not interview footage like the others where they actually talk about themselves, but just, you know, this candid stuff that we see little glimpses of. But all of the interpretation, all of who she is all through the lens of these people around her who knew her. And I think part of the theme of the movie is like, how untrustworthy is that? Like, at what point are they projecting onto her for their own purpose? And I think that's a big part of the ending, is the idea that they basically just make peace with an idea of Alice in their head and move on, but that's not necessarily who she really was. And that's kind of what's sad about the ending, which we'll get into. But yeah, I mean, what did you think of this opening like third, where we were getting all these creepy photographs and visuals, and then it turned out the son had been faking it, and he did it with a purpose as well. He wanted the body to be exhumed because the mum didn't believe anymore that the body that the dad saw was real, even though a lot of the reasons why she felt that way was all these fake photographs and stuff. Yeah. But yeah,
I mean, I guess I'm a little mixed about it, because yes, I can see how this does create a more interesting, deeper story where, okay, yeah, like there's something to be said here about how, yeah, you're manipulating I guess what we're presented with, and you know, it's creating I guess this kind of like, you know, feelings in the family and stuff. But then also at the same time, I'm like, well, I don't know. I kind of liked when it was like a creepy ghost story, you know, like I kind of liked when it was like, oh, cool, like creepy photographs and stuff. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like, I'm not saying that, you know, it's bad for going in that direction, but I don't know. I was kind of like, oh, well, I don't know. It's kind of weird that all the stuff we just watched like wasn't real, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I actually like the revelation because it made it more interesting. I was like, okay, you've got something different to do. You've got something more interesting to say than just doing the generic stuff. That's cool. I think the problem that comes from it, though, for me, is the fact that a little bit later, there's more creepy photos and stuff of catching what seems to be her ghost on camera. And sure. All I could think was, but this just looks like the same stuff as before. The only difference is that now we know it's not him faking it, but it still looks the same. So as an audience member on a pure visual level, I don't feel like this is different from the faked ones from earlier. So The effect has almost been nullified by the earlier revelation. That was kind of how I felt. Admittedly, by the end, especially with the mid-credit stuff, I kind of feel like they kind of recontextualized this a little bit, and I kind of appreciate it a bit more in hindsight. But in the moment in the movie, when they started showing creepy photos again, and it's like, oh no, but this time it's real, I was like, well, yeah, but like, now you've sullied it. Now I'm just thinking, oh, this is like, you already had the creepy effect of us seeing these images and seeing vague shapes of this Alice character in the photographs once, and then you took it away and said, no, that wasn't real. So even if you tell me it is real now, when I see it again now, that first time effect of, oh, this is creepy, is this real, all that's gone. Even though technically it is real now, potentially. I don't know. It kind of neutered some of the rest of the movie in some ways, because and I think it's because I was expecting them to do something different after that opening section. So when we started getting just creepy images again that people had captured, or like, oh, now this one couldn't have been faked for this reason, it was like, okay, fine, but like you're just doing the stuff we already did, but this time it's supposed to be real, but you're not actually giving me anything new visually as an audience member.
Yeah, it also feels like kind of out of tone with like what the sequels end up doing when like Alice comes back as like a wisecracking Freddy Krueger-esque slasher character.
Thanks for that, Tim. Thanks for that.
Like Mungo to don't go in the water.
Okay, I think one of obviously the mother-daughter relationship's a big part of this, and something that's kind of hinted at throughout is that, you know, she can't let go. She feels weird. One of the things that happens in the few weeks after that the daughter's been dead is that she's been like walking into neighbors' houses in the night, which is kind of creepy. And they kind of like don't even talk about it that much. They just kind of like move on and say, oh yeah, she was going through a lot. Yeah, I'll say that's pretty creepy. She's lucky no one attacked her for breaking and entering. But there is one story she tells early on where she believes she saw a ghost, where she believes she saw Alice, and this is not caught on camera. This is just her saying that she saw something. And I think that's important because this is the one that arguably might be real out of all the stuff early on, because she's just telling us she saw it. And then based on what we see later on in the movie, like there is evidence to suggest that she and her daughter did have some kind of, I don't know, spiritual connection where they did kind of like have these link ups where she did actually get a chance to see her daughter at one point. This idea that there is this sighting from the mother, and I think that comes back in a big way based on the thing that happens at the end. One of the things that happens during the middle of the movie, or even early on in the movie, is that they go to this psychic, Ray, who does like a radio show. And they have him, like, the mum talks to him on the phone or on the radio, and then he comes in for like a seance. And they don't really succeed in doing anything, but then, of course, they believe they see something in the background of the footage, you know, like a lot of the movie is. A lot of it comes down to here. You can see Alice in the background of this shot, which I guess maybe is one of the critiques you could have of the movie, is that does kind of get old after a while, where you're like, okay, we've seen this like 15 times already.
Yeah, like, I don't know, maybe it'd work better if there's maybe more of like a ramp up to, yeah, some type of bigger thing or like kind of creepier footage or something. But yeah, it's like you said, it's always kind of the same old thing. And like a lot of times, even, you know, when they're like showing a picture or something, I usually don't even like see it at first. It's like they have to zoom in. I'm like, oh, okay, that's where they are. All right. Like, it's not like, you know, usually even that clear.
Yeah, well, which I get why. That adds to the creepiness of it. It's like, oh, you can't notice it quite at first, but then you look closer and you see the shape sort of form. Like, I get why that is.
And I feel like that's how like a lot of those shows are too. Like,
yeah.
If you ever watch those ghost shows, especially like they didn't really do it like in this movie, but like whenever you watch those shows that have like electronic voice phenomenon, and it's like, oh, listen, like, you know, we got this like ghost speaking on tape, and then they played it, and so I was just like, and then they'll be like, oh, see, he said, you know, screams after midnight rules. And it's like, oh, I never would have got that unless they told me that.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. I was saying very good sarcastically to them, not to you, for the record. I'm pointing that out because you've earned it a few times this review already.
Oh, thank you.
not a good thing, Tim. So a big part of this, right, is the psychic character, and they talk to him, and there's a revelation later on in the movie after they find her diary, and there's a lot more that comes from that as well, but one of the things they find from her diary when they find it is that the daughter Alice had actually went to see the same psychic, and the psychic never told them this, which makes them all kind of mistrust them at that point. But this actually comes back in a big way at the very end of the movie, because this psychic records all of these like interviews and seance stuff, because basically, especially since he hypnotizes people, he wants records of what happens when they're hypnotized on camera for everyone's safety. Makes sense. As much as how much I believe or not believe any of this stuff going on, I appreciate his, like, no, we're going to make clear that everyone's not being, like, mistreated while they're hypnotized or whatever. But because one of the more effective scenes of the movie is that at the very end, it shows that Alice's mum went back to him right after everything calmed down, after everything was over, and things kind of get mended a little bit and patched up. She had one final meeting with the psychic, and it does this thing where it intercuts between her interview with the psychic, or her hypnosis session with the psychic, and the hypnosis session that the psychic had with Alice, but like 5 months before she died, something like that. And it intercuts, and this is one of the more interesting elements of the movie, is this idea that basically what the two of them are talking about as they're in these hypnosis states is the same thing. So Alice talks about, oh, my mum just walked into my room and she's looking down at me, but she's not saying anything. And on the other, in the mum's psychic visit, she's hypnotizing, saying, oh, I walked down the hall and I went into Alice's room and she's lying there in the bed. Sorry, the mum doesn't say that. The mum says she can't see her, right? Because that's actually what makes part of this sad, is that Alice is effectively psychically linking up to this idea in her head. It's almost like the two hypnosis sessions are connected through time, or whatever you want to call it. And she can see her mum and feels alone and scared and feels bad that her mum's leaving, but the mum can't see her anymore and leaves. And it's this idea that the mum's like moving on, or isn't willing to, like, make that final connection or whatever it is. Because this is at the end, right before the family decide to move away, and they basically all make peace with like whoever Alice was. We've learned so much about her. I guess this is who she was, and I guess that she was scared. She probably had dark thoughts, because everyone has dark thoughts, and just kind of shrug it off. And the end of the movie is them leaving, but once again it zooms in on the photograph of them waving goodbye in front of the house, and you can see Alice's ghost in the window left behind. So to me, the kind of the main point of the movie is the idea that they didn't really know their daughter. They learn a lot about her, but they never truly understand her. And because they never understand her, they never give her closure to move on. So they actually abandon her ghost at the end, because for them, they need to move on and they're just ready to leave. But she is left behind, misunderstood, and therefore is stuck at the house. Or, whatever. I mean, you may, pivot that interpretation a little bit depending on how you feel, but that seems to be what I was getting from it. And I think the mother-daughter strained relationship, or that disconnect they have, seems to play into a big part of that, of like this psychic moment of like, oh, the mum's like having the same like visual that the daughter had. She's describing going into the room the same way the daughter described her coming into the room, but then she just couldn't see her daughter. So in some level that disconnect was still there, and the daughter then, Alice didn't feel that connection with her, and possibly just left her feeling more alone and scared on those final months to her death. Obviously we'll talk about late Mungo and whatever, but just to sort of do the through line of the Alice mother relationship.
I guess it's kind of nice that that there is like something that's connecting them, like, but yeah, I guess it's sad that like neither one maybe realized that like while they were, both alive. But I don't know, hug your daughters while you can, because I don't know, you never know what's gonna happen.
Did you not interpret any of this? Did you not have any feelings one way or the other about what it was saying, or the link between them, or I don't know, like did you get the feeling that they were talking about how, oh, the family never really understood her, and even what we hear from them is all from their point of view, so we never get to really know who Alice was?
No.
Okay.
I was just waiting for like an explosion to happen. You know, I like movies with explosions.
Okay,
Watch
what about
Ghoulies 4. There was a big explosion in that.
Okay.
Actually, a pretty decent car chase in Ghoulies 4.
See, Tim's so disinterested. He's now talking to me about Ghoulies 4 of all time. I didn't even know there was a Ghoulies 4.
Oh, you knew there's 4 Ghoulie movies.
No, I did. I thought there was 2. But somehow there's a third and a fourth.
Well, you know the third one's where they go to college. That's the big one.
No, I didn't know that.
Wow.
I mean, like, I knew it existed right now because you told me you watched it like 3 days ago. But before you told me that, I didn't know there was a third one. I thought there was 2. Any thoughts on the weird bruises that the brother gets at one point in the movie?
No.
Tim, you can say something about the movie. You're making me
It's
go mad.
boring. There's nothing to say. It's just people talking the whole thing, and then you see some grainy photographs, and like that's about it. Like I don't know. I'm sorry. I just don't care about it.
I mean, I didn't love the movie, but I'm trying to like see it on its level and what it's I'm trying to understand it as best I can, give it as much respect as I possibly can. And you're treating it like Rob Zombie directed it.
There's not enough like weird, like bizarre carnival swears in it to feel like a Rob Zombie movie.
That's a good point. All right, okay, let's talk about the sex tape. Right, I guess that's
that's like the big. There's the juicy stuff. Like, all right, here's something we can latch onto.
Yeah, let's spice it up a little bit, shall we? What actually is my problem with the sex tape, right? So earlier on when I said, okay, there's that creepy video footage of the figure walking in the hall, the brother admits later on that was faked. However, because some other creepy stuff has happened, they've seen some other creepy footage or whatever, the mum started going back through all of the footage that the brother had captured, even though she knew which parts of it were faked, and started looking for anything else. And that's when she finally noticed that there was someone else in that shot, the person that I had noticed the first time it popped up. And it's a man, and she recognizes who it is. She says, that's our neighbor, right? Or that was our neighbor, at least before they moved. And it's like, okay, why was he here? Why did he break into the house? What was he looking for? And then there's like a sort of safe location, behind a wall where the little safety deposit box is kept, and it's just this little thing that the daughter had, and her diary's in there with a couple other things. The main thing here being, though, is the videotape, which turns out to be a sex tape where she was having a threesome with the neighbor and the neighbor's wife. And I think Alice was meant to be like 15 during this, and she was babysitting the neighbor's kids, so obviously it's all very scandalous and improper and whatnot. I think the detail that was weird for me here is that the police say that they can't track down this couple. I think it was the Toonies. They couldn't find them, and I'm like, whoa, they moved away in case this came out, but like they're not like criminal masterminds here that are on the run from the law. Surely they just moved to another town. I don't see how it's so hard to find them.
Yeah, like I mean, police places have these huge databases. I'm sure you can. I admittedly I don't know how the Australian government works, but I'm sure they have like some type of like.
I don't think it's that different.
you check their taxes or something, or like find out where their like work deposits or something are going, that you can
maybe they left the country, maybe they
could have left the country, they could be off the grid, they could be
changed their names,
maybe they moved from Lake Mungo to Wolf's Creek. That would be
yeah. For the record, I don't want Tim to confuse people. The family do not live anywhere near Lake Mungo, okay? Just for the record.
I thought that the whole most of Australia is Lake Mungo. It's like Lake Mungo, Brisbane, Wolf's Creek, and the Fury Road. That's basically the continent.
So Brisbane got in, but Sydney didn't make the cut.
We love Sydney Sweeney, of course, America's superstar.
Oh dear. Okay, so I think my thing with the sex tape, right, is that so you see this blurry ass sex tape showing what it is, right?
They didn't show enough. That's what.
No, that's not what I'm getting at. My problem with this is that, okay, you've revealed this thing, and I thought, oh, is it going to imply that the guy next door killed her in the water to cover this up, and he wanted to tape after? Is it whatever? And even the police say, when they're saying, even if we find the couple, they're probably just going to say it was consensual, and the tape kind of seemingly backs that up. It doesn't seem like there's a struggle. It doesn't, it seems like there's, because you see a little bit before the sex, and it's like, it seems flirtatious. It seems like, I don't know what the age of consent is in Australia. I assume it's not under 15, but I don't know for sure. I mean, let's just double check, actually. Who knows?
I thought you were always bragging about knowing the age of consent in every country.
I have never done such a thing. Do not listen to Tim. It varies state by state. Australia has states, apparently. I didn't know that.
I don't know that either.
But it's either 16 or 17. So yeah, it's similar to the UK. Okay. That's fine. Yeah. Makes sense. So it's statutory then, but...
I do think it is, like, pretty interesting to make the choice of, like, it being a threesome with the wife, too. Because I feel like a lot of times, if this was going to be a plot line, it would be, like, the girl and the father or whatever. But the fact that it's... or the husband, I guess. Like, the fact that it's, like, the husband and wife is, like, kind of interesting.
Interesting. Does it make it more creepy or less creepy?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Because on the one hand, it's like, oh, it's two of them, so that feels even more heinous. But on the other hand, having another woman there, like, feels like it's... Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but it feels like it might be slightly less creepy just for that reason. But either way, obviously, not exactly the right thing to do. But and they spend like a good 5 minutes of everyone saying they were shocked to find this out. Alice does have a boyfriend who's not actually in the movie that much, but he's there. He's there for a few interview segments, and he's like, yeah, obviously I didn't know. I thought we were in a good place. And the dad obviously sounds quite angry about it. The mum's shocked, all the rest of it. But my problem, this is what I was saying at the start of this. My problem with the sex tape section of the movie is that ultimately I felt like it was just there to spice things up and be shocking, because it didn't really ever feel like it came back to mattering over the for the whole movie, like for the ending. Like it didn't like outside of broadly saying maybe, okay, this is a big example of like a secret thing she had that no one else knew about. And maybe you could extend that further, depending on the timeline, because I'm not sure if this was after Lake Mungo or before Lake Mungo. But maybe if it was after Lake Mungo, maybe it sort of lends itself to, oh, she was in a bad place mentally, and it kind of came from that, as opposed to just something she would have done normally beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the big takeaway from it. Like, even if it was something that she was... that was consensual or something, like if it's something that she later regretted or weighs heavily on her mind or something, like that could have a big effect. But I agree with what you're saying. Like, once you find this out, you do kind of expect that there's going to be like a bigger payoff with it. Like, there's like, okay, so now that we know this, then there'll be an even bigger revelation where like they track the neighbors down, and then like the husband admitted to drowning her or whatever, and it doesn't really come to anything like that.
I also thought at one point maybe they were going to say the brother killed her.
Oh, okay.
But between him being dishonest about the video and like faking the footage and whatnot, the fact that he gets mysterious bruises at one point that just mysterious vanishly after like a week, I thought, is that like the ghost getting revenge, or like try to point the finger at him or something? And nothing else afterwards seems to indicate that. So I'm not sticking to that theory or anything. But it just I was and don't get me wrong, I completely respect that the movie doesn't want the point to be, oh, there's a big reveal about what actually happened to her, right? It's not really saying that. It's not going for that, and that's fine. So the other thing that comes from the diary, though, or the lockbox that had the tape in it with the diary. The diary is obviously what reveals that she saw the psychic, which obviously comes up here, and then again at the end where we see more of the interview. But the other thing, of course, is that the words Lake Mungo are written a bunch of times. And this means something to the parents, because this was like a summer camp or whatever they sent her to. Well, it wasn't a summer, because summer in Australia is Christmas time, which is what the movie starts on. So it must have been during their winter, I guess. But But that's, you know, summer for us, right? So that June period of time, she went to this camp with her friends, and it's like, okay, so why is it so important? And it's around this time where like some of her friends, like phone footage like comes up, and they're looking at that, and you see that you can sort of vaguely see she's there burying something. And I think one of the more effective moments in the movie actually is after you see her phone footage, when they find that, it goes back to a shot from one of the friends' phone footage, and you can see her like the other friends are all happy, but she's looking over her shoulder looking terrified. And it freeze frames on that, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of a creepy visual, because I was like, okay, because at this point I'm like, okay, you've set up the whole idea of this neighbor and the sex tape, you've set up the idea of the faking the stuff, but now there seems to be real stuff too. Like, where's this going? What's this angle for the end? And I'm like, okay, this idea that she knew somehow before she died that she was going to die and was scared of it is, you know, it's an interesting other element, because like it's not just that she died and there's ghost stuff happening. She had stuff building up to it that sort of ties into it.
Yeah, and I forget if it's now or if it's earlier, but aren't they playing some stuff from the psychic session, and she's like talking about being afraid of drowning or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's the first time you see the psychic session with her. Yeah, she talks about drowning and fearing death and whatever.
So I wonder then if maybe like I don't know if there's like an idea, if because there's the things like with the mom and stuff, if like maybe if she is a bit psychic or something, and she's basically like getting these, you know, visions of her own death, and that's why it's like so, you know, ingrained in her mind and her dreams and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if that's what the suggestion is. Like the woman in this family passed down something like a psychic ability, and that's why the mum and her have this moment in the two different psychic interviews where they kind of like overlap, but the mum's isn't as strong as hers, which you can read as like a sad disconnect with her daughter, or you can read it as her psychic ability is just not as strong or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. There is some breadcrumbs like that are interesting to think about. Yeah. But because to see her burying stuff in the desert at Lake Mungo, which by the way, I did not see no lake in this footage. So is it a dry lake? Is that what they're going for? Is it only a lake when it rains? But they go out looking for whatever she buried, and it turns out to be a bag that has her phone, some jewelry, some other things, stuff that they mentioned that when she came back from this place she said she lost. So it's like not surprising what they find, but they find this footage on the phone, and seemingly what she sees on the phone, or what she seen in real life, is that she saw a figure in the dark, went towards it, and it's actually her own dead body, right? So again, it's kind of blurry and whatever, but it looks just like her dead body from earlier on, with the one eye shut and the swollen face and all the rest of it. And you know, it's
pretty cool.
It's a creepy shot, yeah. And this is kind of your big money shot towards the end of the movie, where the characters kind of like sort of just try and analyze, you know, what is this? You know, like, did she see her own self? Did she see a figure in the dark? Like, what? But when they get back home, they basically say, hey, things felt different when we got home, like a weight had been lifted. Like, we finally understood who Alice was and what she went through, so we're ready to move on now. But they never really understood, you know, what she was feeling at the time. They kind of just hand wave it. I think it's the dad who just very casually says, oh yeah, she probably had some dark thoughts, but we all have dark thoughts. Like, he kind of just like hand waves it without trying to understand why she was feeling the way she was feeling. And like I said, at the end of the movie is them leaving, and seemingly her ghost is still just sort of trapped at the house, but now they've abandoned her and she's truly alone, which is, you know, really depressing. It's sad. Yeah. So and then the mid-credit stuff is basically, it's like basically a bunch of photos and footage that we've seen earlier in the movie, but it zooms in and reveals that there was more Alices in the background, like several times throughout the movie. And I think that's tying into this idea of like them just not noticing. Like they've looked through all this footage and they've seen the fake stuff for the most part, but they never actually were able to see her. Like, and that ties into this theme of like they never really knew her. They can't really see her, and the Avatar sense of it, like they can't see her.
Of course, yeah, very direct comparison to Avatar.
We know in Avatar they say "I see you" when they truly like understand someone, and like I see the real you kind of thing. I see you, Jake Sully.
Of course, how could I forget?
Well, this is like her family couldn't see her, right? Both literally and figuratively. Which is fine. Like, it's like, okay, right, so they didn't see all these other examples of her being in the background. Also, at the very end of the credits, I don't know if you let it play to the very end.
I didn't have time for that.
Yeah, there's like a weird moment where it's like flashing footage of her sitting like in, I presume, Lake Mungo, in silhouette, and it's like flashing, and there's kind of like a pulsing sound or whatever, and then it just ends. Yeah. Almost as if she's still out there, almost like she really died in Lake Mungo. Not physically, but like that's where something bad actually happened to her, and everything else, like the drowning was just the end point of whatever started that night.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I don't know. Because you could almost argue that all the evidence she left behind was to try and direct people to go find like what happened to her there. But
sure, yeah, that feels like very ghosty, like, my unfinished business is what actually happened to me, and trying to uncover the mystery and whatnot. And I don't know, I just like on it, I don't know, I again, maybe having some mixed feelings. Like, on the one hand, I do kind of admire the movie for not really going or taking a lot of easy routes, and like, it does feel more true to life to have things very open-ended and not really getting many answers. But at the end, like, I don't know if it doesn't maybe feel as satisfying as to like, okay, well, I kind of want to know a little bit more about what happened or whatever. And I don't know, maybe that's a weird complaint because it's not really what the movie is trying to be about. It's not like, here's this mystery and we're gonna solve it. Like, it's it's about like the family dealing with or like the loss of her, and like how they never really knew who she was, and even we as the audience only get their opinions of who she was along with these glimpses of footage. And I think it's dealing with that idea, the barrier between again, the idea that some of the footage is faked and you can't trust it, just like we can't trust the secondhand opinions of these characters. Like, the idea of knowing who someone really is something that we can never do, and therefore that's what ultimately makes everyone at their base level lonely, because no one will ever really be able to just completely understand you. At least that's what you look for in a partner, I suppose. But this movie's dealing with the absolute despair of like feeling alone. Which I think is interesting, that by the end of the movie you're sympathizing more with the potential ghost than you are with the family, and it never becomes saccharine. It's presented very coldly, which I think if it went saccharine with that, I probably wouldn't like it very much, because it would be like, oh, feel bad for the ghost who's sad and crying and whatever. It's left just open enough that you can sort of interpret that and get that out of it if you want. It's very melancholy. I feel like that's a good word to describe it.
Yeah, that's a good word. But that's not to say that I loved like every scene of it. I definitely was always kind of at like I was somewhere between lukewarm and enjoying. Like, not quite enjoying, but not quite low as lukewarm. Somewhere in between that, where I'm like, okay, I'm kind of intrigued by what they're doing and how they're doing it, and there was decisions made here or there that either pivoted me up a little bit or put me down a little bit. Certainly, I did feel like stuff like the sex tape felt like a big, huge red herring, that other than maybe the idea that, this is just an idea of like something that she was that they didn't know about. But other than that, it didn't really contribute much to the movie, other than being a big spicy red herring where, scandalous.
I feel like you can't really say this about like a lot of movies, but I do think this in particular, and it's probably not the same for everyone, but I think for me personally, it does hurt it to watch it multiple times, because I feel like part of it is, watching it and, getting engrossed in this story and wondering about, the mysteries and stuff. And then I feel like, going in and just knowing already that like, it's just mostly going to be this talking and these like kind of blurry photographs and stuff, and that we're not really going to get many answers and stuff by the end. Like, I don't know, I feel like it's hard to get as excited or as into it, which was just my take. I mean, there are other people that if it works for them, that I'm sure they're probably still super into it when they rewatch it, but yeah, I feel like it was a little harder for me because of that.
I mean, I think if you love the mystery, you probably love looking for more of the photos, like when they show them but don't point out that she's there, and you're sort of looking for them. At the very least, there's a fun game to play with that. Like, I appreciate it keeping its mystery at its arm's length and not making that the focus. Like, I think I respect that, and I think in other movies I really like that approach. I think here I'm kind of 50-50 on it, where I understand why they made that choice, but at the same time, the movie maybe could have used a little bit more to get me excited in terms of the movie. Because I love the idea of sparking my curiosity and imagination with suggesting certain things but not actually showing them. This sort of tries to walk that fine line, but sometimes it feels like it's just a little too pulled back, or even in some ways a little bit too much, in the sense of like, like there's too many photographs where she's showing up in the background. I think there had to be more variables in the sort of things that maybe suggested there was something going on, other than just constantly photographs and video footage where in the background there's a blurry woman standing there.
Well, let me ask you this. I don't know if if you'd have an easy answer for this, or if it would just change the dynamic of the movie too much, but do you think it would maybe work better, or do you think maybe you'd be as interested if this was basically just like, just a regular movie, like it wasn't trying to do, the crime show mockumentary kind of thing? Yeah, I mean, you could just have it like, with, the characters like, talking to each other in the home and stuff, and going out and exploring these locations. Like, you don't have to, like, I guess it'd be very different, but, I guess there would be like a way to do it than just having the people talking. But again, it feels like maybe, that's a big radical change. I don't know if it's easy to say if that would be better or more interesting.
Yeah, it's tough to answer that, because like, I can see this story playing out in a more conventional sense, and I can see that both being better but also worse depending on the choices made of how to actually cover it and how to reveal the information.
Because the thing you wouldn't want to do is like just have it like a regular movie, but then like have the like generic jump scares or something where like, he's taking a picture or something, like the ghost pops out or something. like you definitely wouldn't want something like that.
Yeah, well, you couldn't have that anyway because he's faking it.
Well, true.
Yeah, you'd have to have him just come and say, hey, look at this footage I got, have the other characters witness it, and then you can reveal that he's been faking it at a certain point throughout. But I know that is a very tough question, because the entire format of this movie, like when this movie started its development phase, it probably started with, this is our format, this is how we're telling the story, and we're going to tell it that way. Partly because it's probably a big budget thing, like you can do this a lot cheaper than a traditional movie, which is fine. And I respect the creativity in trying, and I love when a low budget horror movie thinks of ways to, and to be fair to it, there is one or two moments where there is a good creepy vibe, like when she encounters herself in Lake Mungo and it's her own dead body standing there is a good like creepy feeling to it. Like, it does feel like it's hitting just that right nerve of ominous, like, what does this mean? And I think part of that feeling comes from the fact that so much of it is just talking heads, that when you do see something like that, because it's so grounded with all the documentary style stuff around it, it does feel like it hits a bit harder in a way that a regular movie can't do it. But I mean, I guess we're both somewhat mixed on it, is kind of the feelings I'm getting.
Sure,
yeah. I don't know. I want to try and see the movie on its own level, and I think I've tried to do that as best I can. But at the same time, it wasn't always captivating me, and there was definitely like decisions that I was seeing through the cracks on, where I'm like, okay, you've done this, and it feels like a pivot to come back to this, or okay, you've revealed some of these photos and stuff are fake. So when we start seeing ones that are probably real, I'm like, yeah, but it still looks the same. Like there's nothing about it that's proving to me that it's more real. It just, it could just be more fakes ultimately.
No, these are the real ones. Trust me.
Yeah. Which I guess ties into that theme of like everything is being manipulated. Everything, you can't trust any footage or secondhand accounts. Everything's through a perspective, whether it be a camera lens or a person's opinion. Right, and we see that constantly. The boyfriend's wrong about who Alice is. The friends are wrong about who Alice is. Everyone's shocked that she had some sort of affair with an older man and wife. Which, if anything, I would say that whenever they're talking about that stuff, I feel like they really focus on villainizing the husband, and I'm like, surely the wife's just as much of a villain in this.
Oh yeah.
It seems pretty equal between them, I guess. But but anywho. Yeah, okay, well, I guess that's like Mungo. I think we can wrap up. Tim, what was your scene of the movie?
It's kind of a tough one to do because, again, it's like so much of it is just like different talking heads or like blurry photographs. So it's like, which one of those did I like the best? But I mean, I don't think it's a shocker to go with that footage of her towards the end, like seeing her own dead body, just kind of mirror what you were saying earlier. Like it does have like a pretty creepy like vibe to it, and yeah, it is kind of a nice break from a lot of what we've been seeing in the rest of the movie. Like it does make it feel a bit more action oriented, even though there's not like a ton going on, but it definitely fits the vibe and the atmosphere at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the pick to make. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that stuck out to me as much. Yeah, I'll just go with the same. I don't have a better option, really. So, yeah, okay. MVP of the movie.
This is another tough one.
I think really you say that every episode. Every movie in its own way, it's tough to pick these things.
I mean, I think especially this one though, because just like I don't know, they're all just characters talking. Like I don't. I mean, I don't feel like many people got like super standout moments. I don't know. Maybe I'll just go with Alice, just because. I mean. Again, there was like, that one scene and she looks creepy in the photographs and stuff, I guess. And I mean, the whole thing's centered around her. So even though we don't know or, get much from her, she holds the movie together. So I guess I'll pick her.
Yeah, I mean, you do get one scene of her performing. The only time we ever really get her talking like properly is in the interview tape with the psychic. And that comes quite late on, so it does feel like a big deal. We actually just get to hear her say stuff, because up until that point, like maybe you got a little bit in some of the home movies that they showed briefly, but this was like Alice soon before she died actually having a conversation and saying how she felt about things, which again plays into this idea that it's the first time in the movie we can actually just know that we're hearing the truth about how she actually feels, because everything else is just people interpreting how they think she feels. Again, I hate to be boring and just copy you, but I feel like because she's the mystery, because she's the enigmatic one that we don't understand, she's the one that's the most interesting. And I don't think any of the other characters ever have like a performance or a moment where I'm like, oh, like I'm super intrigued in your side of this story. It never becomes that.
Well, it just feels like she's the one that stands out. Like all the other characters, like I'm not saying that they're bad or anything, but like it's not. I don't find like the mom more interesting than the brother, or the dad more interesting than the mom, or you know what I mean. Like they're all kind of on the same level. Like again, I don't think they're bad. Like they're they're characters that are doing what they need to do for the movie. But I can't think of one that got like, well, they had like a really cool standout moment or something, or oh, they had this one really cool line or anything. They're all just kind of the same.
Yeah. All right, Tim, what are you rating that?
It was probably gonna sound like a little harsh. So hopefully the super freaks don't come at me in the comments, but they're gonna, because they love to. but I think I'm gonna go 5.5. I feel bad about it because it probably sounds pretty low. Like I don't like, it's not a movie that necessarily is bad, but this is one that's just like my enjoyment of it, can't really bring my rating up too high. Again, I admire a lot of what they're doing. I think on paper it sounds a bit more interesting, but yeah, when I watch it, it's just a bit of a slog to me. And I don't know, the few things here and there that are kind of cool doesn't really elevate it as much as I feel like it should, and probably does for more people. But again, I can't really fault it too much. Like, it's definitely going for something, and it executes it well. Like, I can't make a complaint. Like, there's a lot of crappy generic horror movies that are like, all right, well, you were trying to be like a cool scary movie and you just didn't succeed. Like this, like, I understand what they're going for. It's just not my cup of tea, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'll go with a 6. Like, I think I don't love it. I respect it, I think, a little bit more than you do, but like I think there's just enough things that pull me out of it, or like a lot of the revelations up until, like, I think once you get to the diary and it says like Mungo, and it's like, oh, we're actually looking at something she actually did herself, or we see her actual interview with the psychic. I think that most of the stuff with the psychic I don't even like that much, except for that one element. Like, that one element of, he did an interview with the mum, he did an interview in the past with Alice, and then when it intercuts them, if I was going to pick a different scene for my scene of the movie, it would be that intercutting of those two interviews at the end, because it's probably the most interesting it gets from a mythology perspective of what's going on here. I thought that was a really cool way to link two scenes between two psychic scenes that I don't think I've ever seen in another movie before. It felt like a unique idea, which I appreciate. I like that. But I do think everything else with the psychic, which is like, his radio show, him coming to see the people at the house, the fact that he took the brother like on tour with them for a bit at one point, they mentioned that briefly. It never really, much came of it. All that stuff, like, it kind of just felt like fluff. It felt like there's just some extra things here to pad out the movie almost. The sex tape in some ways felt like that to me as well. Like, that was like, hey, we need to add some spice to the movie, we need to make it more exciting. So those things do drag it down a little bit for me, and I think also part of it is just that, I've seen other horror mockumentaries, I've seen found footage movies. It's not necessarily wowing me. Maybe it would have worked a bit better in 2008 when I wasn't as either sick of or as used to seeing this kind of thing. But it's not bad though, and I do respect some of the ideas that it's going for, and it does feel like it is trying to say something about loss and about knowing who a person is, and the idea that not all the information about a person is reliable unless it's directly from them. So those are interesting ideas, certainly. Just but yeah, I don't feel compelled to watch the movie again. I don't think I'll ever revisit it. So I guess it's a little bit of a disappointment in that sense. I thought maybe it would be more of a gem, and some people obviously feel that way about it because it does get some buzz and people talk about it. But so I thought it was okay, I guess, is what I'm landing on. It was okay.
There you go.
All right. Well, apologies for this terrible review, everyone. But that'll bring an end to the proceedings. I'll tell you more about bonus episodes that you can get over at Patreon. Every month you get an exclusive episode that's only for patrons or YouTube members, if you'd rather do it that way. But you get access to that. You also get access to even more streams at the $5 tier and up, and all of that does help keep the show going, as well as the other shows we have, because there's bonuses for those too. The Atomic Cinema Experiment, our sci-fi podcast, Collector's Cut, our movie podcast, where we go through franchises and like sort of themes. Right now we're doing 90s erotic thrillers over there, so if that sounds interesting, you can go and check out that and see our opinions on things like Basic Instinct and Wild Things and whatever else. But yeah, I mean that'll pretty much do it. Obviously it's the Octoberthon, more episodes are coming. We've been working through the Omen franchise. We're late-ish in the month at this point. So, we don't have too much time left, but there's multiple bonus episodes for this month since it's October, so hopefully you're still enjoying all the proceedings and you enjoy Halloween coming up. So, but that is us. So thank you very much for joining. We do appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.